The Denver Broncos completed their portion of the NFL draft. Of course, this week starting on Thursday, the three-day event finalized with the Broncos adding 7 players. First time in a while they've been able to have 7 players. And our own Cody Roark from Mile High Sports gets to join us and talk about it. So we're excited, Cody, to have you. I'm looking forward to breaking this down with you all weekend. Before we get into any of the individual players, just your thoughts on the draft on the whole. Maybe a bit surprising when the Broncos went to a lot of positions that maybe folks didn't expect.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that the draft was a massive surprise. I think it was very unexpected in which the direction, that they went in round number 1, obviously, and then maybe how that dictated where they went in rounds 2, rounds 3, so on and so forth. But this is, Sean, I said it in my post-draft thoughts over at milehighsports.com, which is up and available for anyone who wants to read it that hasn't done it yet. Mock draft simulators, I think, have ruined the idea of what discussion and discourse on players are, because you look mock draft simulators, things like that, they have certain projections. They have players going to certain places, or they have them being as a round 5 guy or a round 6 guy, in some cases. And then, players and people do their mock drafts and they get very comfortable with the names that they've picked. And then when those names aren't as shiny, or they didn't do enough background on some of those players, they're like, oh, this is a terrible draft. Folks, you got to look at the forest through the trees at this point and see where the Broncos were at. Obviously, I think let's start off here with Jahdae Barron, obviously in round 1, pick number 20. I was in there at Dove Valley, Sean, and we were all sitting there. We were waiting. We're anticipating. We're seeing how the board's falling. And then pick number 10 comes around. And then the Chicago Bears take Colston Lovelin. And in my head, I was like, okay, there's that. The Colts take, you have different guys. And then Tyler Warren ends up coming off the board. And we sat there and we're like, all right, the Broncos are in a great position to get a wide receiver or a running back. Emeka Egbuka, a guy I really wanted, he went off the board at 19 to Tampa Bay. And I said, okay, hey, 20, here you go. All right, Broncos, we were sitting there like, is it going to be running back? And then it was cornerback. All of us, inside the Broncos atrium at the Broncos Park powered by Common Spirit, we're like, whoa, we didn't expect that. But it is a great pick for the Broncos. I mean, you're getting an elite level player at a premium position. And Sean, look, it's not necessarily a position where I think people are looking like the Broncos didn't need that, but the Broncos are adding to it. And I would say the argument here, Sean, we saw what happened last year when Riley Moss went down with an injury. The Broncos secondary struggled. They played man coverage at a rate on the field with Riley Moss 40.1% of the time when he was on the field. When he was off the field and not playing, that dropped to around 31%, according to NFL Next Gen Stats. And that right there just says, hey, okay, if our scheme is changing because of one player being off the field, that's problematic. Now the Broncos, they go out there, they get a guy who can play man coverage. He can play zone coverage really well, but he can play inside, outside. He can play in the box as kind of a safety. This is a true joker on the defensive side of the ball.
So in his introduction that he can move over to safety, he feels okay with that. This is a guy that won the Jim Thorpe Award, the one basic award that he was up for that Travis Hunter didn't win. That's probably saying something as well. And when you talk about the idea of Barron fitting, I like it. In fact, that the beauty is you can have that just kind of be the way it, people look at Riley Moss and say, wow, he played great. He did. But you know what? What's the problem grabbing more? You have Jaquan McMillan, you have Moss, you have Barron, and you just roll the ball out and say, hey, guess what? However it works out, it works out. But you guys get to decide it. You simply can't have enough guys that can stop the passing game in the AFC, which is loaded, in the AFC West in particular, when you have Patrick Mahomes, when you have Justin Herbert, and quite frankly, an underrated Geno Smith in Vegas.
They played Joe Burrow again this year.
Right. So, I mean, there's no point in missing that, especially when Barron on a lot of people's boards, make of it what you will, was sitting around that number 10 overall player. And the tight ends went a little more quicker than people expected. We knew that both Warren and Loveland would be lucky if the Broncos got one. They reversed in which one went first, but that doesn't matter very much. I thought it was a good adjustment. I thought it was the right move, even though it meant you had to kick back on the running backs from the two that were pretty exciting, Omarion Hampton and Travion Henderson. Instead, they go in the second round, go down to University of Central Florida, pick up a little bowling ball, 5'8", 205-pound RJ Harvey, put up a lot of numbers in his final 2 seasons with the Knights.
Yeah, look, I like the RJ Harvey pick. I think he can have an impact day one. I don't think And I could be wrong here, but I just think right now, looking at how the Broncos are currently assembled, knowing what I know about how they feel about Audric Estime, I don't know if RJ Harvey is going to be a starter, but I do think that he's going to be a key rotational piece here because I see it just by watching his tape. I was coming back from New York. I was on a flight this morning, Sean, coming back, doing my cut-ups. So I'm going to do things a little bit differently for these NFL draft prospects for our Broncos film room from Mile High Sports on YouTube. I got individual games of some of these players. So I'm going to do film reviews of some of these individual games that we see these guys play in versus one just big one there. So you just watch this guy, man, he's explosive, 4.4 speed and a 40-yard dash. But I mean, when you watch the tape, this is a guy who makes quick cut decisions. He's got good vision. I think he's patient as a runner. If something is not open inside, he does bounce it out and he's able to get the edge on a lot of players. This guy right here, RJ Harvey, has the intangibles, I think, to be a guy that if Audric Estime is coming in, and let's say Audric is your primary 3-down back that the Broncos are hoping he can be, the idea is that he's going to wear down defenses. And then you bring in a guy like RJ Harvey, who's got this explosive speed, but he's 5'8", 205 pounds. He's also a physical bowling ball at that standpoint too. They're hoping they're getting the smash and dash combination with these two guys. I mean, Sean, I love the numbers he put up. And obviously, he suffered an ACL injury in 2022. He had better numbers coming off the ACL injury than he had pre-ACL injury. I mean, 2023, the year after his ACL, 1,400 yards, 16 touchdowns on the ground. You go to 2024 last year, 1,500 yards, 22 touchdowns on the ground. And to be honest with you, his offensive line was not that good. Quarterback play was awful for Central Florida. I mean, they had guys coming in and out. It seemed like, at least on the film that I've got, a handful of different weeks, you had a different guy under center, and really, he was their offense. And this is a good pickup here for the Broncos, and he's going to come in and compete in this room. And I think one thing to maybe keep an eye on, Sean, they have a couple of running backs coming out for rookie mini camp tryouts. Chris Evans, formerly of the Cincinnati Bengals, suffered a torn patella tendon, missed all last year. He'll be there. But primarily the Broncos have not looked at adding really any backs to this post-NFL draft roster, which tells me that they may look at maybe signing a veteran like a J.K. Dobbins or Nick Chubb, or they're going to go in with the guys that they got, and it truly is going to be a youth movement at that position.
Yeah, and obviously a running back by committee as well. Harvey averaged in the last 2 years after that ACL injury 13 yards per catch. He can catch out of the backfield. That could stand to get better, but if he continues to work at it, he could be better. And as Cody pointed out as well, he has that long speed. He does have good burst, but if he is open, forget it. He has that long speed. He pulls away and he is gone. The Broncos went the other way, though, in the third round. They go ahead and get a wide receiver. They go get a big body. Pat Bryant out of Illinois. Did a little bit of research on him, too. He's a very good route runner. He's got good hands. He knows how to use his body, but he ran the second slowest 40 at the combine of any wide receiver. And at the NFL level, I'm a little bit concerned that might be a problem. This feels like one of the things that occasionally Sean Payton has done at his time with the Saints. That he kind of he's looking for value, which is what you're supposed to do. But sometimes he gets a little too clever and can outsmart himself too. I look at Bryant and I have a lot of hope, but I look at him and Devon Vele and think, what's the difference between these two guys?
Yeah, I think maybe Vele's a little bit faster. I think with Pat Bryant, the thing that stands out to me is how, and you're going to see this on the film rooms that I'm going to be putting out here on Mile High Sports YouTube page there. With Pat Bryant, I mean, this is a guy who has 110% effort and energy every single play. There's no drop off. This is a guy who doesn't take plays off. If he's got press coverage and it's a run play, he does a really good job of selling as if it's a pass play, and he runs corners off. He's physical. He does the dirty work as a blocker. But this guy, I mean, you do see how good of a route runner he is. And yes, of course, he doesn't have the speed factor that you're hoping for, but his athletic measurables and how he tested, honestly, when you look at it from a relative athletic score standpoint, almost every important metric he tested very similar to Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. And the thing here, and I see this is a guy who's not a fast wide receiver, but this is a guy who can make explosive plays, especially in the short intermediate parts of the field. He's not going to be a guy that's going to get behind defenses on a vertical route. But this is a guy who's a great route runner. You can find a way to scheme him open, but getting him the ball, he's sure-handed. And I'll say this as well. I was on the flight back home this morning, Sean, and I'm going through my Pat Bryant film, and I'm trying to cut it all up. And there were just so many opportunities that were missed by his quarterback. And I thought, wow, this Illinois quarterback, He's so up and down. Like there's times where he's overthrowing Pat Bryant. There's times he's going to a sideline and he's, instead of just throwing it to where he can catch it with two hands and get his feet in, he throws it above his head where he can't even get it. I mean, the quarterback play was not great for Illinois last year, but Pat Bryant definitely showed out in that situation. He does the little things, the little details, as the blocking, the nuances of that I think even if he's not getting the ball as much, Sean Payton values that. It's not like the guys that we were talking about, the Emeka Egbukas or maybe some of the other wide receivers. But then again, we knew coming into it, this wasn't necessarily a strong wide receiver class ultimately, but hopefully you can get some good depth pieces. I think he'll be a good depth piece. I think he will compete with Devon Vele here very early on for the Broncos offense and the scheme that they want to run.
What I loved, I went back, Cody, and looked at his interview at the Combine, right? When he had they have the small press sources with him, meet with some media at the Combine. And I took note of one thing he said. He talked about how his mindset is no block, no rock.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of the interview that I had with Ed McCaffrey out at the Super Bowl, where he was talking about the blocking with him and with Rod Smith that helped lead the Broncos to Super Bowl titles and how important it is. And if you have a guy that basically says, look, I understand that. I don't expect to get the ball unless I block. That's got to be kind of news that coaches like hearing a lot. So for Pat Bryant, I think that's one of the things that probably impacted the Broncos' decision as well. Then you go the third round pick and the fourth round pick, two pass rushers, but very, very different ones out of LSU. Savon Jones, really long arms, really lanky guy, better, more polished pass rusher at this point. But when you're playing a lighter front, if you're going nickel or dime, he can also play in the middle. And then the other one, Alabama's K. Robinson. When you look at Robinson, you're talking about a player that was tied for the lead at sacks in Alabama before he had the injury that ended his season. I don't know how much he'll be able to quickly compete in the Broncos pass rushing groups because obviously it's very deep, but he profiles as an absolute weapon on special teams on day one.
Yeah, first I'll talk about Savon Jones here. I mean, this is a guy I think is going to be a rotational defensive end here for the Broncos. I think the upside and the vision for him, something to keep an eye on here, is can he eventually become a starter here? I mean, he had 43 pressures last year, Sean, at LSU, and this is a guy who's just got a high motor and is just relentless, when he comes off the field. I think one thing he does a good job of is edge discipline. He squeezes down the end man of the line of scrimmage relatively well. If there's anything coming outside, he takes good angles there. This is a guy who doesn't, with defensive line, how physical of a position is. Sometimes you see guys lollygagging, as we'll call it. And then, there's times where they get tired. He plays through getting tired, which you look at guys like Zach Allen, it kind of fits what they want to do. Ideally, this is a move where they're adding depth at defensive end to play behind John Franklin Myers and Zach Allen alongside Jordan Jackson. That's where I think Jones is going to factor into the equation here. I probably think he's going to get, a decent amount of snaps as a rookie in a rotational role there with Jordan Jackson behind those guys that we talked about, especially the Broncos invest in Zach Allen and give him a contract extension. They want to be able to protect their investment. And so, it's being able to pull them out from time to time and rotate different guys in. Now let's go to Q Robinson. You're right. I mean, this is a guy, he's explosive, Sean. And the one thing I like about him is he brings immediate value to the special team side. Now you talked about, him not being really a factor right now in the Broncos pass rush. I think that's a safe bet to say. I don't think the Broncos drafted him and say, okay, hey, we want you to play this season, but there's a possibility that he could. I think primarily this addition of Q Robinson is a special teams addition with adding injury insurance to the outside linebacker position. You're bringing in a young guy who's got some upside. He's got some intangibles that you can work with. This draft here for the Broncos, really, I'd say outside of round one, was never about going out there and getting starters. Sean, I don't know how many times I had to put this out on social media, TikTok, tweet it, whatever you want, or even write it. But the Broncos, before the NFL draft, they are set from a roster standpoint on starters on offense and defense. You can make the biggest argument here that running back was the really big question. Like, we don't know who the starter is going to be. Every other position, though, was accounted for. Wide receiver, corner, for the most part, safety, linebacker, defensive end. Like every starter on the Broncos offensive defense, they had that going into the draft. So this was about adding depth and guys that you think maybe could play 2 to 3 years from now as guys come in and out, as you see roster turnover happen over the course of of years there. This was very much a depth building draft, and I think Q Robinson is going to be a special teams player to watch probably from day one. And I'm curious how the new special teams rules would kick off, how that prioritizes what type of body types get preserved more for your roster in comparison. Back in the day, it used to be O linemen. Now it might be more DBs and linebackers. You might carry some extra guys because of how the new special teams rules are going to be playing out, specifically in the kickoff and kick return game.
Yeah, I think that's something that to really keep an eye out. And of course, for special teams, the Broncos went there in the 6th round, picking Jeremy Crawshaw, the 4-year starter for Florida, former Australian.
I thought you were going to say Crenshaw like everybody else has been saying.
No, Crawshaw. And a 4-year starter at Florida. Got better after he basically gave up rugby entirely. And last year, in all the opportunities to punt, only had 4 touchbacks. So you're talking about a guy that's got a big leg. He's a power punter, but he's also got the ability to pin you deep. For the Broncos, I think this was a really smart pick. Every year, it's funny, people laugh about picking punters and kickers. Why would you not go get one of the best 2 or 3 in the country when you can always grab them in the last couple of rounds? It makes sense to me, especially when you're starting to pay veteran punters $4+ million a year. Go get yourself a rookie. I know that they added another punter in Matt Hawk over the offseason, but I think this is quite frankly Crawshaw's job to lose.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Look, Matt Hack has not had a consistent resume of punting in the last couple of years. There's been some stints here and there, but primarily, he has not been a team's first choice. Now, obviously, they signed him. They brought him in because Denver loses out on Riley Dixon in free agency, who goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But you bring in a guy like Crawshaw. I mean, this guy can boom it. And look, here's the thing, Sean. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that other teams can come to Empower Field at Mile High and their punters can boom the heck out of the football, pin the Broncos offense back deep, but Denver can't do it consistently enough at home? I think Crawshaw, you mentioned the booming leg, or our good friend Andrew Mason, I was talking to him. He said when he was watching him at one of the, I don't know if it was the Shrine Bowl or if it was the Senior Bowl, but he was booming it. Like every time he kicked the ball, it sounded like a cannon was going off. He's got that power behind his leg. Denver needs that in a big way here. And obviously he's going to come in and compete. I think this one's going to be probably an easy competition. I think Crawshaw is going to win it. And I think that the Broncos are just going to have these 2 guys, in training camp, and it's going to go probably to that second preseason game. And then I think that they're going to really transition to the one guy. I know Sean likes to do that, but, you bring in competition for a veteran guy who, you're not quite sure about, but also for a rookie, it's like, hey, we want to test you a little bit. Can you handle it? He's going to get plenty of opportunities. And I imagine he's probably going to get primary opportunities when the Broncos play their preseason games this year.
Yeah, I think so too. And then we've talked about this whole draft and we haven't talked about the tight end. The Broncos did finally address it in the 7th round, but we're talking about a developmental guy in Caleb Lerner out of Utah, played basketball at BYU and at Baylor, just started playing football this season, and it went pretty well. He had 4 catches for 4 touchdowns. That part's good. But the Broncos, I think, understand that this is a developmental guy. He's not going to be part of the answer at tight end, at least not in the early going, but they hope that maybe down the road, you're talking about an Antonio Gates, Julius Thomas type of basketball convert.
Yeah, look, and this is a fun gamble here by the Broncos in Champaign. I mean, he's got 6'8" size, and he's got a 40-inch vertical. I mean, this is a guy who, obviously the basketball background, you factor in, okay, hey, what can he do well? Well, this guy, he's doing alley-oop dunks. He's running the fast break. But now at the NFL level in football, right? Obviously not a large sample size. 12 total games for BYU, not a primary pass catching option for him. Mainly special teams, but when he got in, 4 catches, 53 yards, 4 touchdowns. So every catch he had was a touchdown. So you maybe get creative with him. Sean Payton said the thing that they really liked about him at his pro day was you started to see like the movement skills, like the potential that he's got there. The football stuff, that sample size is very small. Why not take a risk on something that could potentially turn into something? I mean, the Broncos did the same exact thing with Julius Thomas, who played basketball at Portland State University, and then Julius became a very big impact player under the Peyton Manning era, though I'd say despite the athleticism, we definitely saw some deficiencies that Peyton Manning did not like about Julius. There was a lot, so these guys are always developmental projects here. You mentioned the Jimmy Grahams, Tony Gonzalez's. I mean, obviously that makes sense, but why not take a flyer on a guy who's 6'8", has some upside, can move at 6'8" size, and maybe could become a red zone threat for you at some point. Not, I think some people are saying, "Oh, is this the next Jimmy Graham?" It's hard to get into those kind of comparisons and conversations just because what Jimmy Graham was able to do was spectacular, right?
This guy's played 12.
This guy's just getting started. He's got a long ways to go. But you know what? If the Broncos are willing to be patient and say, hey, like this is a guy may not make the 53-man roster, but we'll put on the practice squad. We'll develop him here. Maybe a year or two from now, if that goes well, maybe we will see him on the field at some point.
Did the Broncos maybe pardon the pun, but punt on tight end because there are still options in free agency? Gerald Everett is unsigned. Jordan Akins is unsigned. CJ Ozoma's unsigned. There have been guys that have gotten some stuff done in the league. Could the Broncos be looking to add to the tight end room that way, figuring that's a better way to find someone that they can contribute as opposed to wasting, or at least spending, a high draft pick on one?
Yeah, I find it interesting. I mean, there were a handful of different tight ends that were available in some of the earlier rounds, Sean, that the Broncos certainly could have gotten. Obviously, the guy that I wanted, obviously a local guy, Terrence Ferguson, goes to the LA Rams for Sean McVay. Watch that be a nice little pickup for him and Matthew Stafford. For me, that's where I question things, because there was some buzz. Obviously, day of the draft, we're there, and now you're starting to get some buzz inside the building. We're like, all right, hey, the Broncos, they may be trying to trade up for Colston Lovelin. I think there was some validity to that conversation right there. And obviously today on the Pat McAfee show, Ian Rappaport goes on with Pat and is talking about there's calls, during the NFL draft from the Houston Texans, from the Denver Broncos about moving up in the draft. And he said when Colston Lovelin went off the board to the Chicago Bears, those calls stopped after that. So kind of putting two and two together, it does necessarily make four. And, we were thinking about that. And it's like, okay, well, why not maybe try to trade up for Tyler Warren? I don't know if Tyler Warren did the things that maybe the Broncos are looking to have at that position.
On top of that, the Colts were they basically all but telegraphed it all offseason. They're drafting the best tight end they can get. They probably weren't going to trade that.
I'm surprised they didn't trade up for Lovelin themselves. They're probably kicking themselves, because I think a lot of people thought Chicago was going to take a running back. Like there was a chance if Genty was there, they were going to take him. There was even some talk that maybe Travion Henderson could have been a guy that went to the Chicago Bears, or Marion Hampton. But obviously, that really led to the board falling how it did, Sean. I think when Colston Lovelin was off the board, the Broncos' priorities then shifted to, people are always saying, like, who's the best player that is available, in the draft based on the draft board here. Whereas it's like every NFL team has their own board and it is entirely different, right? So there may be, like, for example, Marion Hampton, Broncos fans like, Marion Hampton was on the board. He was the best player. They should have taken him. It's like, well, on the Broncos board, they're probably having it like, nah, Jahdae Barron's got a higher grade on our board and we want to take the best player. And they even said, Sean and George told us before the draft, we're not afraid to add a strength, add to something we already have as a strength. And I think that's exactly what they got with Barron. And it's going to make things fun. And look, you can defensively, you can make things better for your quarterback by giving you more possessions, right? During that final 5-game stretch, Sean, when the Broncos had to go back and forth offensively with all these other teams, including Cleveland, which that should have never happened. The Broncos, you need guys that can get your defense off the field. There was, I think, in 3 of the last 5 games, the Broncos played defensively. And this is also including the playoff game against Buffalo. The defense was on the field for 75 plus plays. That's not good. Ideally, you want to aim for 58, 63, but once you get past 68 plays on the field defensively, that means you're on the field way too much and you're not getting off, and time of possession certainly did reflect that. That's how you can help your young quarterback in your offense. But the Broncos, like I said, they got to continue to build the offense here, and seems like there's a level of trust in the direction that they're heading, at least from the front office.
Post-draft now, you look at the roster, where do they still need help? Where do you think they're going to maybe shore things up in free agency before training camp?
For me, I would say probably the one position where they probably need just some help. I feel like it is the, tight end position. Right now, I think you got Evan Ingram, who's clear-cut starter number one. You've got, I think, behind him, it's Adam Troutman. You've got Lucas Kroll, Nate Adkins. And now, obviously, you still have Thomas Yasmin, who's got the NFL International Player designation once again. So he's not going to count against your roster this year. So you got that. And then obviously you've added, Caleb Lohner into the mix here as well. Maybe you could add a veteran into this room here. Adam Troutman's going to be on the final year of his deal. So I'm very curious to see if they're going to add to this position at all, or if they're going to go into maybe training camp. Because also factor in this, Sean, they're also going to be looking at other teams' players in the preseason that may get cut. And that they're hoping they can maybe bring back onto waivers, where it's like Denver's like, nah, we're gonna steal this player. That's where a lot of the scouting process now transitions to, now that they've signed their undrafted rookie free agents. They've invited players to rookie minicamp. Now their sights are going to be set on their scouts or looking at other players' rosters as the preseason goes on there. So a lot of moving pieces, but tight end honestly seems like the one position to me that, maybe they should add to. But aside from that, I mean, like I said, their depth is very solid. They have a lot of numbers, and they have all their starters really intact for the most part. So it's hard to really see where they could go from here.
Well, we'll find out as the offseason goes along. You'll want to follow Cody for all the latest. Check out all the film rooms, by the way, on the Mile High Sports YouTube.
They're coming.
And they are going to be coming fast and furious because Cody's on top of it. That's why we love having him every week. Cody, thanks for that breakdown. It's tremendous. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Appreciate you having me. And look, as always, hey, look, go Avs tonight. Some exciting stuff on the board. And hopefully the Nuggets can punch the Clippers in the mouth tomorrow night. So we'll see if that's the case. But
yes,
appreciate you all as always.
Thanks so much. Cody Roark joining us from Mile High Sports. Make sure you give him a follow and check out everything he puts together at milehighsports.com. Grab the app. Get it all in your pocket as well.